Hello everybody, welcome back to another video by Jay Bowman. Today I'm looking again at one of my favourite synths, which is the Mask1 by Kodamo. And it's going to be a bit of a different video this time round. I'm not going to do any sound design or playing through patches. Instead, I'm going to look purely at 3 or possibly 4, depending on time, experiments that I've done recently to try and get into and explore the nature of bit masking and how it operates on the Mask1. So hopefully these will be useful and interesting for you if you own a Mask1 and want to explore these features more yourself, or if you're interested in the synth and the techniques and just curious to see what's going on under the hood here. So let's start from an init patch. I should say I've got my oscilloscope here as well, and FFT, so hopefully that will be useful in exploring what's going on here. So for the first experiment, I'm going to look at the question of LSBs, because obviously we know about the Mask1 that you have a set of discrete masks and they play in order, and there's no way of blending or interpolating between the two masks. So we have mask 7 and 8. You can see from the oscilloscope here that mask 7 is a sawtooth wave, mask 8 is a square. There's no blending between them, you just go from one to the other. So that is generally the position. There are occasions when you can hear intermediate stages between the masks, what are referred to, I think, as least significant bits between the bit masks. But the way these operate and manifest themselves is not completely obvious, and it's a bit of a dark art. I don't know that there's any detailed explanation of what's actually going on there and how you hear these least significant bits. You can hear them sometimes when you're using the LFO to modulate between bit masks, because some of the LFO values, they go between the integer numbers of the bit mask. So instead of going from 7 to 8, you might go from 7.5 to 6.5, for example. So that's just an example. And sometimes with the delta envelopes, which modulate the bit mask position for each oscillator, you can hear the least significant bits between the bit mask shapes. So what I'm going to do is just experiment, because that's not the case all the time. So let's have a look. If I use the delta envelope to go between 7 and 8, so we're resting on bit mask 7. I've set the delta envelope start position to 1, so it's going up 1 to 8, and then I've set the speed to 1. So it's only going to be coming down at a very, very slow rate. So if there are least significant bits between 8 and 7, we should hear them in the transition between 8 and 7. So let's listen to what happens when I play a key now. So there we went from the square wave to the sawtooth wave, and unless you listen very carefully, it's very difficult to hear any intermediate stage. I think right in the very high harmonics, the very high partials, you might be able to hear some kind of transition. There's some difference in the stages between 8 and 7, but basically it just sounds like a binary straight transition, 8 to 7. No, but that's not always the case, because this is one of the curiosities about the way that the Bitmask or the Mask1 engine operates. Let's go for this experiment to mask 0. And I'll take off the delta envelope for now so we can just see what mask 0 is. Okay, so it's very quiet sawtooth wave. So I'm going to increase the volume of the synth. I'm going to increase the volume of oscillator 1 to the maximum. Now I'm going to normalize this recording afterwards, so some of these differences in volume might not come out quite as strongly, but mask 0 is very quiet. So what I'm going to do, it's also very high in pitch, so I need to go to the semitone setting and reduce that down to 60, so minus 60. So that's 5 octaves below 0. So that is now playing at the same pitch as mask 7 was earlier. And there you can see on the oscilloscope, we have a sawtooth wave. So that's mask 0. What's mask 1? It's another sawtooth wave. So what I'm going to do now is transition between mask 1 and mask 0 at a very slow rate, in the same way that we did between 8 and 7 just now. And I want you to listen carefully, watch the oscilloscope, see how many different wave shapes you can hear in this transition. So I hear 16 distinct wave shapes and see 16 distinct wave shapes looking at the oscilloscope. And once you hear the rhythm of how it's changing, it's more easy to discern the differences. So the rhythm is like 1, 2, 3, 4, so like that. So I'll play it again. So 16. So you'll see, question, are there 16 steps between 8 and 7 and we just can't hear the difference? I don't know. The other thing that's interesting is if we reverse the experiment. So I'm going to put the start point at -1 and I'm going to go up to mask 1. So now the delta mask envelope is going to take us down to from 1 to 0 and then back up to 1. How many different wave shapes can we hear and discern in this occasion? Now I might be going crazy, but I think I hear 17 going from 0 to 1, whereas I hear 16 going from 1 to 0. I'll play it again. Very curious. Anyway, that is that experiment, just looking at the least significant bits. And obviously you can modulate between these least significant bits, and you can change between them using the LFO, using the delta envelope. I'm not going to go into all of that in this video. This is a starting point. So if you want to play with those different wave shapes, it's just useful to know that the space between Bitmasks 0 and 1 is a very interesting start point and a place to experiment from. So that is the first Bitmask experiment I'm going to go through in this video. Let's have a look at the next one. So let's go to an init patch again. So again, we're resting on mask 7, which is the sawtooth wave. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the envelope slightly. I'm going to get rid of the sustain, the amplitude envelope I mean. And I'm going to go for that kind of plucky type of envelope. And this is really just an example of how you can use the Bitmask transitions in in sound design. I mean, really, the point is that each bit mask has not only its own shape and amplitude, but also pitch, and this is a very good sequence of bit masks to demonstrate that. So if we, starting at 7, we go to -7, so that's taking us all the way down to 0. Go to speed 3. And by the way, I'm not looping any of these envelopes, just for these purposes. So let's have a listen to. So that's basically the experiment. So it's just a tip to maybe start you on the journey of saying, okay, how can I use the different qualities of these bit masks? Because on the journey from Bitmask 0 to Bitmask 7, we go through several different pitch states and quite subtle variations in bit masks, because a lot of them have a kind of sawtooth flavor, but played in that way, they have a kind of delay or echo quality to them, as well as the shift in tonal quality. So that's the second experiment, looking at those transitions from 0 to 7. Okay, let's have a look at experiment number 3. Now for this one, again, I'm starting on an init patch. And what we're going to do is go to Bitmask 90. So I'm actually going to increase the semitone because, as you can tell, 90 is playing several octaves below standard pitch. And I'm just going to adjust the oscilloscope there so you can see interesting wave shape of Bitmask 90 there. So what I'm going to do is, rather than using the delta envelope, I'm going to use the LFO to modulate mask position. So I go to destination in LFO1, change it to mask, and I'm going to go to the wave shape, and I'm going to use random wave, and then I'm going to change the amount to 15, which is the maximum. The range goes from 0 to 15, and then I'm going to choose speed 7. So let's hear how that sounds. So it's perhaps a rather obvious experiment there. The random wave is just modulating through the bit masks at the rates that we've set for the LFO. And because the LFOs are continuous, because they're continuous, they operate differently from the delta envelopes, obviously, which are dependent on key press. And that is a way to get a kind of characteristic sound out of the Mask1. Now, what's interesting is if you modulate the start position of the bit mask, so at the moment we're at 90, and if I go increase the position, then that will change the quality of the bit masks that the random LFO is modulating between. So let's do that. So I've gone up from 90 to 511, which is the maximum Bitmask position. So hopefully you'll have heard that as we went through the series there, the sounds became more nasally. Now, what I didn't do was increase the semitone, which I should have done, because at the moment, the way the Bitmask series is set out, every 16 or so Bitmasks, you get a jump in octave. Now, what I think would be really interesting as options for Kodamo to add, maybe in the general menu, is 2 alternative modes for the Mask1. So at the moment you have those jumps between octave and amplitude, which can be very useful for sound design. So I think it's great that they're there at the moment. But it would also be very interesting to have an option where the Mask1 goes into a normalized pitch mode, i.e. all of the Bitmasks in the series are set out so that they all play at the same pitch, because then you could modulate between the masks and just get the tonal changes or the timbral change without changing the pitch. So that would be one option. Another option would be to normalize the volume, because again, at the moment, transitioning between the Bitmasks, as you can hear in this example, and see on the oscilloscope that different Bitmasks play at a different amplitude. Now, if there was another option to normalize the Bitmask series for amplitude, then again, that could be a very interesting option to give you the chance of using the Bitmasks to change timbre without changing the amplitude of the waves. I mean, again, as I say, for sound design purposes, it can be very useful to have those different pitch levels, those different amplitude levels for different masks, because you can use that to your advantage. But again, it would be really nice to have the option to have a kind of standardized, normalized pitch and amplitude options for modulating between the Bitmasks. So that is the third experiment I'm just launching there, which is the random mask kind of experiment. Now, as I've made quite good time in the video, what I'm going to do is just as a last bonus experiment, let's go to an init patch again. And I should say, apologies for the background noise. I don't know if you can hear that, but my guinea pigs are just going crazy on the water bottles there. And it's quite a loud noise, but hopefully it won't come through in the microphone too badly. So yes, the bonus experiment. What we're going to do is start with an init patch. Again, we're resting on mask 7, which is the sawtooth wave. Let's go to mask 158. Now, if I play this higher up, so you can see the shape on the oscilloscope, you'll see there that the mask has a kind of discontinuous shape, as in there's a period of oscillation and then a period of silence. And it gives you really interesting tone, depending on what octave you play it at. Now, another interesting feature of the Mask1 is the range of pitch that you can achieve with this instrument is absolutely amazing. It's like nothing else I've seen. So obviously in the oscillator menu for each oscillator, you have a semitone option which goes from -60 to +60. So what's that? That's 10 octaves there. So you've got a 10 octave range there. You've also got these octave buttons, each of which can go 2 octaves down or 2 octaves up. Then in the general setting for each patch, you have a further semitone option, which can take you down another 3 octaves or up 3 octaves. And then I think possibly in global, you've got a further semitone option, which can take you down 1 octave or up an octave. So the amount of modulation you can achieve from the lowest sounds to the highest sounds on this instrument, I think is far greater than any other synth I've experimented with. Let alone, you've got the keyboard there, so you can, you've got the octave choice between the 5 octaves on the keyboard, obviously. But anyway, getting back to the experiment. So I've set mask 158 to -60, which is the maximum I can achieve in the semitone menu in the oscillator. So what we're hearing there is the discontinuous nature of the Bitmask shape. And obviously, the further down I go on the keyboard, the slower the oscillator plays, and the more obvious that discontinuous nature becomes, because a lot of it is silence. The majority of it is silence. So another thing you can tell from this experiment, which is not obvious when you're just using the keyboard normally, is that these oscillators are each free running. Because depending on when I press the key, I could start in silence, or I could start in the middle of the part of the wave that has the kind of variation in amplitude, or the pitch information. So obviously the oscillators are free running. Now, another option I've asked for to be implemented in a firmware update, which would increase the sound design possibilities, would be for to have the option for the oscillators either to be free running as they are now, or to be start on key press. And the reason, which will hopefully become more obvious in this experiment, is I think the free running oscillators obviously add to the general virtual and analog feel of this synth that you get when you just use it in standard plain vanilla mode. It would be really useful though to be able to get that really straightforward digital mode where each oscillator only plays when you press the key, because some of these wave shapes, some of these Bitmask shapes can be used effectively as LFOs. And once you start getting into the lower pitch range, as I am now, that's when it gets interesting to use them in this way. So let's go with the experiment. Okay, so we've gone -60, we've gone 2 octaves down using the octave button. Let's now introduce some looping delta envelope. So I go to the start. So the start of the loop is 2 Bitmasks above 158, so it's going up to 160. The speed, let's set that to 22. So this is quite fast into audio rates. So let's hear how that sounds. No, I haven't set loop, so you weren't hearing that. So let's try that again. So that's changed the sound completely. This is with looping envelopes off. This is with it on. So hopefully you can hear there's some pitch information there, even in the supposedly silent bits of the oscillator. I'm doing there is changing the speed of the delta mask envelope, and that is changing the pitch because obviously that we're playing at audio rate. So the pitch information in this sound is coming from the delta mask envelope rather than from the oscillator or the Bitmask oscillator itself. Bitmask oscillator is operating as an LFO, changing the amplitude of the pitch information that's coming from the delta envelope. So what is the benefit of that other than being quite an interesting patch? I would say another thing that I've asked for from Kodamo is if there be a way for the speed of the delta envelopes to be key synced or pitch or track the keyboard basically, and you can see there from that example how that would be useful. I mean, it would be useful generally when you're using the delta envelopes because you find a nice tone on particular keys. It'd be good to be able to make that play across the whole keyboard. But hopefully that demonstrates another potential use of this these delta envelopes. I mean, one thing I've asked for is for whether you can use the Bitmask through a firmware update. You could use the Bitmask shapes as LFO shapes, but here you can see that you can already kind of get that effect by reducing the oscillators into sub-audio rate. And then you can get some pitch information from using the delta envelope. I suppose there are other audio rate modulation sources that you could use, maybe the filter envelope, etc. So anyway, that is the last bonus experiment that I want to go through on this video. So hopefully that's been interesting and useful. If you've got a Mask1, you can use these experiments as, you know, the basis for going in and actually designing sounds around them, or just to pique your interest. I find this synth to be an interesting playground for, you know, testing ideas, trying to explore what's actually going on with it and what it can do, what it can produce. So if you've made it through this video, thank you very much for watching. Please give me a like and a subscribe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the next video. Goodbye.